This figure is one of my favorites in geometry because it is a simple representation of a mathematical truth that is usually among the ranks of arbitrary things one has to memorize in order to pass a test. But when I first discovered this figure, I was angered because no one bothered to show it to me when I was in high school. All I got was the unimaginative and flat algebraic version, x squared plus 2xy plus y squared. Instead, I had to find this figure when I got to college and we cracked open Book 2 of Euclid's Elements. I suppose there's nothing necessarily wrong with teaching only the algebraic version, but if you can demonstrate a truth in more ways than one, why wouldn't you? The connection between x plus y quantity squared and x squared plus 2xy plus y squared is not obvious, and requires a handful of mental calculations to be convinced. I can fully sympathize with the error of thinking that x plus y quantity squared is simply x squared plus y squared, because this is precisely the error I made when I was in school, and because it makes simple sense. This figure makes it clear why x plus y quantity squared isn't just two squares. For one, the two small squares don't make up a bigger square, but that is what we should expect from x plus y quantity squared, since this literally means take two lengths together and make a square out of that length. Now I see why we need those rectangles, and why we need exactly two of them. Once all the pieces are put together, I can see that I have a big square, where all the sides are x plus y. Since I was deprived of this lovely visual proof when I was in high school, I made it a point to share it with my students so they could benefit from the logical steps of the algebra and the sapiential perspective of the visual proof. But, like all good mathematical problems, they tend to multiply. That is, they naturally lead to other beautiful questions. And I began to wonder, could I make a model of the three-dimensional version of this? Of x plus y to the third power? I was certain it was possible, so I bought some straws and some pipe cleaners and I got to work. I know now there are loads of images and videos online depicting exactly what I was attempting, but I didn't know that at the time. To get started, I first constructed what I knew would be the end product. That is, a cube where all the edges are x plus y. This model is a little flimsy, so let's give it some structure. That's better. Now we can see the parts better. We definitely have the blue cube and the red cube, but there are all these other prisms needed to fill in the rest of the big cube. Looking at the algebra, we know that x plus y to the third power is x cubed plus 3x squared y plus 3xy squared plus y cubed. The first and last terms are just the perfect cubes, the blue and the red ones. But 3x squared y means we will have three prisms with dimensions x squared y, and likewise three prisms of xy squared. The more I look at this model, the more comfortable I feel with the algebra, because it is easier to remember that this cube is made up of a total of 8 prisms or solids that fit neatly together. And with this, I can see all 8 solids immediately. Once again, however, this puzzle led me to another. If I can model x plus y to the third power, what's to stop me from modeling x plus y to the fourth? Nothing! Well, that's not entirely true. The only obstacle was that my weak three-dimensional imagination couldn't begin to imagine what this four-dimensional model would look like. I wasn't even certain that it was possible, but I gave it a go anyway. I began with a different approach this time. Rather than making the finished shell and filling in the guts like I did with the 3D model, I thought I'd make all the parts first and try to piece them together until I have a complete tesseract. But how do you figure that out? You could do it the long way by multiplying everything out algebraically, but that's tedious. Instead, I went to my buddy Pascal, whose triangle allowed me to know the number of 4D prisms and their dimensions immediately. Obviously here I'm skipping the trivial case of x plus y to the 0th power, which is just equal to 1. So there we go. 1, 4, 6, 4, 1. These are the coefficients. This means we'll have 1 x to the 4th power, 4 x cubed y's, 6 x squared y squareds, 4 x y cubes, and 1 y to the 4th power. I know that the first and last terms are just going to be perfect tesseracts, just like with the 3D model, but what about these other terms? Let's take one example of x cubed y and try to make sense of it. Note here that I'm sketching a 4-dimensional object. That is, I'm making a 2-dimensional representation of a 4-dimensional thing, so it may not look pretty. Anyways, what this means is that in 3 of the 4 directions, I'm going to have blue straws, and in the 4th direction, I'll have a red straw. In 4-dimensional space, all 4 directions are orthogonal, or at right angles. But since we run out of space in our world, we have to settle with this shadow of the 4D object, knowing that in reality, all 4 straws are at right angles. Just like how the 2D drawing of a cube, you have to draw some lines that are not at right angles, knowing that in 3-dimensional space, they are in fact at right angles to each other. Here's a model of x squared, y squared. And here's one of x, y cubed. Now that I knew it was possible to build all the parts, I did some calculations to determine how many blue and red straws I would need. 256 of each color, so more than 500 straws total. I promptly ordered the straws, but they came piecemeal and not all at once, much to the chagrin of my wife.
Are you serious? How many more of these are you gonna buy?
Now I had the materials. It was time to start building. I knew that the complete model would be made up of a total of 16 4-dimensional objects, namely 2 tesseracts, 4 of these, 6 of these, and 4 of these. All that's left to do now is piece them together, right? Right? I quickly realized that my well-thought-out plan was not going to work. It was my 3D-minded bias that led me to think that I could just assemble the 16 hypersolids and be done. But of course, the solution was more nuanced. The hypersolids would be pieced together like a puzzle, but they wouldn't just be next to each other. They'll have to intersect. When I build a simple tesseract, I begin by making 2 identical cubes, but then I have to break one of them so they can be linked by the 4th dimension. Likewise, if I was going to put the pieces, that is the hypersolids, together, they are going to have to intersect or overlap. If it still isn't clear why this is necessary, imagine you have a Flatlander friend, Edwin, and you drew a cube in his world and said, "This is a cube. It's made up of 6 squares." He'd laugh at you and say, "That's just a janky hexagon." You could show Edwin that this is in fact a flat representation of a cube in a couple ways. You could put him inside the sketch where he would not see squares, but different shapes that he would reasonably deduce are overlapping and intersecting squares. The other way is that you could draw a cube unfolded into 2 dimensions, where he could clearly see 5 squares and intuit where there was a 6th square in the heart of the cross shape. His brain would likely break, however, when you told him that this edge and this edge are the same in 3D space. Likewise for this edge, and these 2 as well. I'm partial to the second method, because when it's applied 1 dimension up, I catch a glimpse of what it feels like to be Edwin, trying to comprehend something beyond comprehension. A 4-dimensional cube or tesseract is made up of 8 cubes, and one can unfold those 8 cubes to look like this. Somehow, in 4-dimensional space, these 2 things are the same. The surrealist artist Salvador Dali was also enchanted by the 4th dimension, and a few of his works were diligent attempts at capturing that world that is invisible to us, yet ever abreast to our own. Alright, now that I had all my materials, I had built all my models, and learned my lesson on how they fit together, I was finally able to build this. This may look like a mess, and to be honest, it is a bit of a mess, because it's a 3D shadow of a rather complex 4-dimensional object. And while it's not perfect because the straws and pipe cleaners will bend and bow where they're forced to intersect in 3D space, the finished product isn't without some beauty. Personally, I find it mesmerizing to look at. I'm sure someone smarter than me can easily make a similar model in a computer program that will allow you to explore the object. But I must say that there was something invaluable about building this model with my hands. Looking at the finished object, it's very difficult to see all 16 of those original hypersolids. But if you piece them together yourself, you can pick out each hypersolid with at least a little ease. It is mind-bending to think that all 16 hypersolids can fit into this compact object. But it gets even crazier when you consider what it would take if you were to unfold this into 3D prisms. A tesseract is made up of 8 cubes, but every hypersolid is likewise made up of 8 prisms. This means that the perfect quartic is composed of 128 three-dimensional prisms. I tried to make all 128 prisms, but that would require too many straws, and my wife had already cut me off. Again, I know how Edwin must feel. Somehow 128 solids can be pieced together to make this compact thing in 4-dimensional space. It's humbling to accept that I will never fully understand the clumsy model I've built, but it's also incredible that I can know anything about this other world at all. These beautiful thoughts are what fuel mathematicians, and I hope you find them beautiful too.